Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. So Charity Cup has just ended. Let's take a look at the last game duel between Magnus Carlsen and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. In the game, Jan-Krzysztof Duda had white pieces and he started with e4, c6, d4, d5, and we have Caro-Kann defense, and now white plays f3, and this is classified as a fantasy variation. Very interesting continuation. We don't see that so often, but the idea is black should capture on e4, white recaptures and is trying to build a very strong pawn center. Now in the game, black plays e6, white plays knight to c3, knight to f6, now e5 attacking the knight, knight from f goes back to d7, and now white is sensing that black will try with c5 undermine the white center, so white plays knight to d2 clearing c3 square, and this is what happened in the game. c5 was played, c3, and now black plays knight to f6, further putting pressure on this d4 pawn. White plays f4. We have a pawn structure similar to that arising from a French defense. And now black continues with the development. Bishop to e7 was played. Knight goes to f3. Black castles king side, and white immediately plays h4, threatening with h5, harassing black king on the king side. And now black plays f6, challenging this very solid pawn structure in the center. Of course, white shouldn't capture because then his very strong pawn structure is lost, so this is a very strong asset for white. So white plays a3, and black immediately responds with a5, preventing this b4 pawn push, because if white plays b4, then a pawn captures, and white cannot capture with a pawn, because then rook on a1 is for free. Instead, white plays knight to g3, so white is gathering forces on the king side, clearing e2 square, preparing bishop to d3, targeting this weak h7 pawn. Very unpleasant, so black immediately responds with queen to b6, further putting pressure on this d4 pawn, who is 3 times attacked. So this is a sort of a prophylactic move. Black is trying to prevent bishop to d3, but white doesn't care. Bishop to d3 was played anyway, and black grabs the opportunity. C pawn captures on d4. Now let's see where we are. Of course, white could recapture on d4, but then black would probably capture on d4. White would capture with knight. Now here in this position, black shouldn't capture with queen, because we have bishop to h7, discover attack on the queen. Black would very much likely play f pawn captures on e6, attacking the knight, and also trying to get this pawn on f4. So white would have to capture on e5, knight to e5. Now let's see for a sacrifice piece. Black has 2 pawn. Also this bishop is under attack, as well as the knight. Well, this bishop is a very strong asset, targeting this h7 pawn, so white would probably remove bishop to c2. After that, bishop to c5. When this knight is gone, we have bishop to f2, double attack on king and the knight. After knight from g goes to e2, defending. Then probably bishop to e7, trying to deploy it on the queen side, targeting white king. Well, for a sacrifice piece, black has a strong initiative and with 2 very strong central pawns, so this could have been a very interesting continuation. In the game, however, white has other things in mind. White played knight goes to g5, targeting this pawn on h7. Now let's see if, for example, black starts to grab material after d pawn captures on c3. Bishop simply capture on h7, check. King to h8 is the only move, and after queen to h5, when this bishop is gone, we are going to have mate in a couple of moves. If, however, f pawn captures on g5, again we have bishop to h7, check. Of course, king can try to run on f7, but after queen to h5, g6, and queen to g6 is checkmate. And of course, if king goes to h8, of course, again we have queen to h5, targeting king on h8. So here in this position, black would have no other option but to capture bishop on h7. After that, h pawn captures on g5 with check. If king goes to g6, we have queen to h5 with checkmate. So king would have to go back to g8, but after g6, white again is threatening with queen to h5 with mate on h8. So here black would have to give up 1 piece back after bishop to g5, threatening to block this h file. White would capture on g5, and after that rook to e8, creating escape square for his king. Still, this would not be enough. After white would try with knight to h5. Even if black captures on e5, we would have knight to f6 check. Now if king goes, let's say, to f8, we have rook to h8, when this king is on e7, and there goes our rook. If, however, black would grab the knight on f6, simply pawn would recapture, again threatening with king to h5. Even with black captures on g6, we simply have rook to h8 check. If king captures on or knight captures, doesn't matter. Let's say if a knight captures, we have queen to g4 check. If king goes somewhere along this squares, then we have queen to g7 checkmate. Even after knight to g6, queen to g6 is going to be made in the next move. So in the game, black plays h6, preventing this bishop to h7 sacrifices, and also closing this h file with an h pawn. And now white grabbed this pawn on e6, attacking rook on f8. Well, black responds with knight goes to e5. Black says, okay, you can grab my knight, but then I'm going to grab yours. So white accepts the challenge and grab this exchange instead. So knight captures on f8, knight captures on d3 check, queen recaptures, and bishop captures on f8. So let's see where we are. Black is exchanged down, but white still has an uncastled king. Okay, black has additional pawn, but white's king position is very bad. White cannot simply castle because then we have d pawn captures on c3 with discover attack on the king. Bishop to e3 doesn't help. Then we have d4, and later black threatens also with grabbing this pawn. The correct continuation in this position would be rook to b1. Because let's say then, for example, the bishop to g4, trying to deploy the rook on the e file, then white can castle on king side, because after d pawn captures on c3 we check, bishop can go to e3 defending, and after d4 we have b pawn captures on c3, we have discover attack on the queen, and later white also grab this pawn. In the game, white saw the things a little differently. Bishop to d2 was played. Now, of course, black plays bishop to g4, clearing this c8 square, preparing rook to e8 with check. So white plays queen to g6, preventing this rook to e8 with immediate check, also targeting this bishop on g4. And now black captures pawn on b2, attacking rook on a1. White responds with rook to b1. Now rook on b1 is protected, that's true, but now black plays rook goes to e8 check. Queen can capture rook on e8, that's true, but then queen captures on b2 check. Now the only option for white king is king to f2. Rook on h1 is protected, but here black would play queen to b2. Now this bishop on d2 is pinned, that cannot be effectively guarded. Let's say after king to e1, black simply plays d pawn captures on c4, attacking the bishop. Bishop cannot go to c8 because here queen captures it, and after bishop to e3 we have d4 and bishop is lost. I mean, let's say after bishop to f2 we simply have queen to a1 mate. Anyway, this position is definitely lost for white. So in the game, white has decided to remove the queen, but if queen goes to f2, then we have queen to d2 with check. So white plays king goes to f1, and black has decided to sacrifice another rook. So queen captures on d2. Now white queen captures on e8, but now black plays queen to f4 check. King goes, let's say, to e1, then a queen grabs on g3 with check. So white has decided to go with king on g1, and now queen captures on g3. Now let's see. For two rooks, black has 3 pieces, so and also additional pawn. So this is again winning for black. If white tries to trade the queens, let's say after queen to e1, black would simply grab on e1. After rook grabs on e1, simply d pawn captures on c3, later cementing pawn on c3, also cementing this bishop. Black has 3 pieces for 2 rooks and additional pawns and 2 pass pawns, so this is again definitely a winning position for black. So in the game, white tries with some counterplay. Rook goes to b7, targeting this f7 square with queen to f7, trying to attack the king and later grab this bishop. But now black plays knight goes to e5, preventing any queen to f7 or any, let's say, d7, e7. All these squares are now taken. Now let's see what white can do. Not very much. If white makes a random move, let's say a4, we have queen to e1 check. After king to h2, the only option, knight to f3 check. Now the only option for white is g pawn captures on f3 and queen to f2 checkmate. If, however, white would try with rook to b1, preventing check on the first rank, then black would play queen to e3 check. Now king has 2 options. If king goes to f1, then bishop to e2 check. King to e1 is the only option. After that, bishop to f3 check, king to f1, queen to e2, king to g1, and queen to g2 checkmate. If however king would go to h2, then we would have a knight to f3, and then we have a discover attack on the queen. Black gains decisive material advantage. And realizing that there's no point in playing on, in this position Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigned the game and Magnus Carlsen became the winner of Charity Cup. So I hope you like this game, I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now and see you soon.